Welcome, everyone. It's fun to see those of you who have the camera on and those of you who don't. I totally get it. No worries at all. So, you have all decided to spend some time today thinking about money and specifically achieving financial stability, freedom, and security. Who doesn't want that, right? When they put together the title, I thought that was pretty impressive. This is what we all want, right? Why is it? Oh, hold on. I'm going to share my screen with you. Put together a couple little slides. Let's see if that works. All right. Can everybody get me a little thumbs up? See if you see that slide. Yep, good. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a relatively short time. So what I'm hoping to do is to share with you two kind of little mental tricks that I use a lot and that I use with my clients a lot to try to help them make good financial decisions. Why is this important? I firmly believe that when women are more financially secure, when we are more financially resilient and have that stability, the world is a better place. There's actually research proving that when women have that financial security, they then turn to help their family and their extended family and their community and turn their focus to the outside world, improving it. So I feel like my mission is to make the world a better place, one woman at a time, by helping empower us to make those good financial decisions. Really, what we're after is that confidence and clarity when you're making choices and doing things for your future self to get you to be set up to live the life you want to live. Really, I think what a lot of us get stuck in is in kind of the procrastination, the avoidance, not taking action, or even just kind of going on autopilot or on default. That's not usually the right answer. So I love this little baby. Um, I want to tell you a story about a client of mine named Camille. This was years ago. She had moved to a different state, taken another job, and we had, been working together for a couple of years. And she was all set to open up an investment account, and we had discussed the strategy. We had talked about how much she was going to put in every month. We had the whole plan set. So my team put the paperwork together, and we sent it to her, and nothing. Days clicked by. I didn't hear from her. I emailed her, crickets, right? Nothing happened. Finally, I was starting to get worried. So I gave her a call. And as soon as she got on the phone, I could hear the pain in her voice. It turned out they hadn't been able to sell the old house where they had moved from. So they were carrying two mortgages for a period of time. And completely understandably, they had built up some credit card debt. And she was so ashamed of this, that this had happened. She was embarrassed to admit it to me. Whereas, like, I get this stuff. I'm not going to make her feel bad about it. There was a lot of judgment going on in her own head, and it had paralyzed her from taking this action that she had decided was going to be good for her future. So we really do get stuck around money decisions, in my experience, right? We tend to avoid things. We tell ourselves that we're not good with money. Well, I'm going to call baloney on that. There is evidence that women are actually better investors than men. And I have a book. I'm quarantined in my home office at the moment, so my book is at my office. But there's a book called Warren Buffett Invests Like a Girl and Why You Should Too. There's literally proof. They've had all these big studies showing that women are better investors. So let's leave behind this idea that women aren't good at money. We avoid it sometimes because it brings up uncomfortable feelings, right? Maybe shame or guilt or embarrassment or, worries about our self-worth, issues of comparison, comparing ourselves to others, to neighbors or to family members, worries about being judged, right? And we have this kind of mistaken sense that money is supposed to be just super rational. It's all about numbers and spreadsheets, and emotions have no part in it. Again, baloney, right? Money touches all the most important parts of our lives, our relationships, our careers, our feelings of security, right? Are we secure in where we're living and what we're trying to do? How can it not be emotional? Of course it's emotional. So let's make that okay to be emotional about money. And then we think we should know this stuff already. Like, I feel like a lot of women kind of get all up in their heads because they're like, dang it, I should be better at this. I should know all of these answers. And that's a load of crap, if you excuse my French. First of all, no one taught us, right? We don't learn this stuff in school. In my high school, there was one class on accounting. I didn't take it, but there was nothing on personal finance, right? How to deal with money as an adult in the world. Most of our families don't teach us, don't talk about it openly. And sometimes the example they set, sometimes it was a good constructive example, sometimes not so much, right? In my household growing up, there was whispered arguments late at night when they thought the kids were asleep. That was kind of how I grew up with a thought about money. And we're not allowed to talk about it. Women learn in large part by talking and sharing stories. But if we're not allowed to talk about money with our friends, that's another avenue of learning that we're cut off from. The other thing is there's a whole mountain of science proving that human beings are bad at money. If you don't believe me, you can Google behavioral finance. There are college courses. There are tons of books. There's Nobel Prizes on the subject. Literally, they prove that we're bad at this stuff. My favorite book title in this area is called Predictably Irrational. So not only are human beings irrational around money, we are irrational in predictable ways. And to me, that leads to this little picture here, right? No shame, no blame. Okay, so we've bounced checks in the past. That is okay. So we've spent more than we intended to when we went to Nordstrom or wherever, online shopping during quarantine. No shame, no blame, right? We are literally, our brains are wired to shoot us in the foot when it comes to achieving our financial goals. And some people might take that as bad news. I take that as good news, right? This is not evidence of a character flaw. This just proves that we're human. Okay, so now what do we do about it? How do we move forward? Here's my big motto. You do not have to know all the answers about this stuff, but you want to take some time to learn the questions to ask. And then the key is having the guts to ask them. Years ago, I was teaching a course. We called it Living with a Spending Plan because no one likes the word budget. And during the break of the course, this woman came up to talk to me. Her name was Lucy. Lucy was like an 80-some-year-old retired nurse. She was a wonderful woman. And she had a stack of papers with her. And she came up to me and she said, "Oh, Stephanie, my financial advisor recommended this to me. Could you take a look at it and tell me what you think?" So this was an annuity contract that she had been sold. No comments on whether annuities in general are good or bad. But my question to her was, okay, Lucy, when you spoke to your advisor, why did he suggest this was a good move for you? And she said, "Oh, I don't know." She didn't ask the question, right? Ask the questions, especially when you are being sold something. Ask questions. It's never rude to ask the questions so that you can be more informed and make a wise decision. So who the heck am I to be talking about this stuff? I'm Stephanie McCullough. I am founder of Sofia Financial. That's Sophia with an F, which I'm told means wisdom in Greek, which is why I chose the name. I have been a financial advisor, financial planner for 23 years. And I shifted my focus to working with women specifically in 2011. I do work mostly with single women, whether divorced, widowed, or never married, who are probably in kind of my age range, right? Let's call us Gen X and boomers who are looking towards retirement, whatever the heck that might mean to them, with some trepidation. And they're looking for a true decision-making partner in this area. So I'm in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I think we have people from all over. Welcome. I know they have got my contact info and I've got it at the end too. So you'll be able to reach out if you have specific questions. So what are we going to learn today? Two of my favorite little mindset tools for helping us get over some of this kind of difficulty that the human brain has around money. So the first one is called Conversation with Your Future Self. So the really interesting part about, I think, well, there's lots of interesting parts about the age we're living in, including this little picture here. Have some of you seen this video? When I searched for future self images on Google, this came up. This is a silly video about January Julie being told by April 2020 Julie what the heck is coming down the road, and her face is just priceless. But anyway, um, they've done research on what different parts of the brain are activated when we face certain decisions. So they hook these kind of test subjects up to the functional MRI machines, which is those little caps with all the wires, and they're looking at a picture of your brain. And what they studied were what parts of your brain are actually working when you're making a decision about, do I want something today, versus when you're making a decision about, do I want something in the future. So they actually discovered that there's two different parts of the brain, right? So if I'm talking about, do I want to buy that new car, or do I want to put more money into my retirement account? Or do I want that piece of chocolate cake that's sitting right there in front of me? Or do I really want to lose that 5 pounds or 15 pounds because it's 2020? There's two different parts of the brain that are thinking about these rewards. And guess which one is stronger? The one that considers the reward in the present moment, which is why it's hard for us as human beings to delay gratification. So the conversation with your future self is a visualization exercise to try to overcome some of that difficulty by putting both sides of the issue into the present tense, trying to tie our long-term future goals, right, which can feel kind of smooshy, especially if, the future, we don't exactly know what it's going to look like, but we know having more money in the future would be good, right? That's kind of a smooshy goal. Whereas this thing you'd like to have right now today is very tangible and very immediate. So we want to try to equal the playing field, level the playing field, and put them on more equal footing. So what's really helpful in doing that is tying that long-term objective to an immediate feeling. Right? If we can give those future goals some emotional resonance, some reason that they matter to us right now, we might be more likely to take that action that's going to benefit the future self. So here's an exercise, and I totally adapted this from someone a long time ago, and I should find out who. But I think, this is not an uncommon thing. You've probably heard about it in other contexts. But the idea is that you sit very quietly, right? Close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and you want to start to imagine your future self. And the idea is that you imagine that life has gone swimmingly. Everything has worked out the way you wanted to. You've met all your goals, your dreams have come true. You are living your ideal life, surrounded by the things and the people that you love, right? The worries you might have had about the future, none of them panned out, right? Everything worked out well for you. And the idea is to spend some time on it, bring in as much imagery as you can, right? You want to be super specific about the details. And it's okay if you're making a guess, right? Don't get hung up on, but I don't know what I want to do, or where I want to be living. That's okay. Envision one ideal future scenario. And you might pick a certain age or a certain date, or like, a certain number of years down the road. Maybe it's 10 years down the road. Maybe it's age 75. I don't know what it is. Something that might be meaningful to you, or just pick a random date. Doesn't really matter. So you really want to try to be there and kind of feel what it's like to be in your future life. And then the next step is to start to have a conversation with your future self. And the key questions to ask are, hey, future me, what do you, I'm going to read this specifically because I don't want to get it wrong. What would you most like me to do in the present so that your life, when I become you in the future, would be better, easier, happier, more fulfilling, more prosperous? What are the actions that you really wish I would take right now? What could I be doing today that I'll be glad I did when I become you? Those kinds of questions, right? There's a lot of different ways to phrase it, but ask it and then sit with it and see what comes up, right? And then maybe try to keep the conversation going to learn as much as you can. And then I think it's important to write down what you thought of, what your future self said to you, because once you get back into normal life, it's easy to kind of lose sight of that. But start to write down what you notice. You might want to revisit your future self for inspiration, right? If your goals adjust or when you change. But it might be, just a trick to try to help prioritize, because all of us are dealing with limited resources, right? You wouldn't be on this call if you weren't dealing with limited resources. Most of us, unless we're Bill Gates, right, we have a limited number of dollars. And there's always this tension between the stuff I need today and the stuff I want to do in the future. Putting stuff towards the future, right, can be difficult. So that's what this conversation with your future self is aimed at doing. My second little exercise is slightly different goal. And I've totally stole the name from a client of mine. She talks about her ramen noodle budget. And I did this in another workshop, and she called me on it. She's like, "You stole my name, didn't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. Sorry." So the thought about this is that no one likes budgeting. No one likes the idea of kind of depriving yourself of stuff, right? Budgeting feels like limiting what you're allowed to do and restricting your life. That is not what we're after. So the ramen noodle budget is not how you want to live. And I'm not saying this is how you should live. It's a thought exercise, and it's a numerical exercise to look at if you had to cut back, if something occurred in your life, things go a little bit sour, and you need to live on less, where would you cut? Where could you cut, right? What things would you start to adjust in response to this? So, maybe some things that you'd be willing to sacrifice for a period of time. What would most move the needle, right? Maybe I could cut back on my cable budget, but that would only save me a little bit per month. But if I cut the cord completely and just did Hulu or something, right? How much would that move the needle? You're gathering information. This is like a scientific experiment exercise. And then you want to write this all down, right? What are the things you could do, and in what order? And if you have a partner, someone with whom you share your household or your life, then it's a useful thing to do together. I mean, it's 2020, right? We all know that shit happens. We've seen people who were in a dual income household who are now in a single income household, right? People were furloughed and lost income for several months. People have lost jobs, right? Things happen. But the idea with the ramen noodle budget exercise is that before, hopefully it doesn't go sour, but before it goes sour, when you're able to be calm and cool and rational about things, you've gone through the exercise so that if something happens, or you can think about it positively too. If something comes up that you'd really like to save for, if we're ever allowed to travel again, right? And you want to save up for a nice vacation, or you have an opportunity, where could you cut in your current today spending so that you'd be able to put money towards that other goal? It's about being at choice, right? And having agency over your financial situation. So many of us get to a point, especially when we're busy living our lives, where our financial stuff is on autopilot. Everything now is a subscription. So many things that you just turn on and then they happen automatically. We're not living in a world anymore where we actually have to physically hand over greenbacks to get the stuff we want. That would not even be sanitary in a current pandemic world. But you can spend money with a couple clicks or a swipe or a wave, right? Or a subscription. You don't even have to do anything, and someone's taking money out of your account every month. So what we want to do is bring more mindfulness and intentionality to this. And very often what people discover when they start looking through where their money goes is that, hey, you know what? I'm spending money on this thing over here, but that actually is not really adding to my life. I don't need that anymore. Or, maybe it's a subscription you signed up for that you forgot about and haven't been using. Or it's, I'm spending this much on groceries, but maybe I'd rather spend it on something else. It feels like drudgery. It feels like a really unpleasant task to look at where your dollars go. And it's so powerful. I heard a scientist say once, that which is measured changes. So very often, even just going through this exercise, even if you're not looking to cut, it brings some changes. So having the awareness and the intentionality, remember, the numbers on the page aren't judging you. The judgment is all up here. It all comes from our beliefs and our stories and whatever that we're carrying around. about money, which, remember I said, is totally normal and human. But the numbers on the page are just numbers on the page. It's just information. And the more information you have, the more informed decisions you can make. I love this little picture. There's a guy named Carl Richards who was a financial planner for a long time. And then he started making these Sharpie drawings. And the New York Times called him one day and said, would you like to do a column for the New York Times? So he's the sketch guy in the New York Times, and he's able to distill a lot of important financial concepts into these little Sharpie images. So I really like this one. There's a lot of things out there that matter and that affect our financial futures that we have no control over. Government policy, taxes, inflation, economy, and what's going on. And then there's the things that we can control that matter, right? And the biggest two things we can control and have some say over are the dollars that go out of our wallets and our household and the dollars that come in, right? The income is a whole nother conversation. But I would encourage you to try to leave that shame and blame behind and bring yourself to do these exercises of focusing on the things you can control. I am not going to, I never judge my clients on where they're spending their money. And remember, I mentioned that class on the spending plan. Another person who was in the class, she was a housekeeper, didn't make a heck of a lot of money. And one of her biggest line items in her budget was sending her grandson to baseball camp every year. And it brought her so much joy to be able to do this for her grandson because her daughter couldn't afford it. And she thought I was going to give her a hard time for that. Heck no, right? That's a wonderful thing. That makes you so happy. It makes him so happy. That is beautiful. And if she had to cut back on a lot of other things to get there, that was okay with her. So that's an example of what I'm talking about when like doing those, mindful decisions. All right, I'm going to pop into the chat real quick to see if we've got any questions. If anybody's here live and would like to unmute yourself and ask a question, you may do so. Let's see. Oh, wait, I just saw the chat and then it went away. There's my contact info. Well, I'm trying to find the chat again. Here we go. Yes, hard to save living paycheck to paycheck. I know. I totally understand that. For most of us, again, it is limited resources. I think, looking at those line items in your budget, and I know there's not always a lot of wiggle room, but finding something somewhere. Sometimes people say, oh gosh, but I could only maybe save $10 a paycheck. It's not worth it. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Every little bit that you can start to build up as an asset is helpful for sure. So Rebecca asks, are stocks a must for putting yourself in a good position? So that gets to the question of saving versus investing. And I'll just quickly touch on that. So when we're looking to put money aside for our futures, right, we kind of have these two options: saving, which is in the bank, which is not earning much interest right now, but it's never going to go down in value, right? Even if your bank goes bankrupt, you have Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation protection. You're not going to lose your money. Investing are things like stocks and bonds and mutual funds. The big difference is that you have some level of risk. And risk in my world means it can go up and it can go down. So you have a higher future growth potential, but you're also likely going to see some bounciness along the way. And the big risk with investing in stocks is that you could buy in when the market is high and then need your money when the market is low. Or the other risk is that you get emotional about it and you panic when the market goes down and you sell. Then you've lost money, right? You put it in when it was $100 and you sold it when it was $50. That's not what you want. So anything being invested in the stock market should be long-term money you're not going to need for quite a few years, so that you can afford to ride out those ups and downs. And you want to make sure you have some money in the bank before you invest anything in stocks, because if something comes up and you need something unexpectedly, you want to make sure that money's going to be there. You don't want to take risk with that short-term money. Or if you know you need something in a couple of years, whether, saving for a car or a daughter's wedding, whatever it might be, you want to put that in the bank, not investing. Oh, that's a good question. What's better to invest in, real estate or stocks? I'll tell you, I'm not an expert on real estate, but I would ask the same questions. Remember that it's not about the answers, it's about the questions to ask. What you want to ask for any investment is, oh, you know what? Hold on one second. I have another slide to share with you, but it is hidden, so I have to go unhide it. There we go. Okay. Slideshow, and then share, sorry. Technical fun. Okay. You guys see this 5 questions to ask now? Hopefully you do. So here's some of key questions to ask when you're making any financial decision. And I would apply this to, do I invest in real estate? Do I invest in stocks? Or do I buy this pair of boots, right? You can kind of apply them to any situation. So the first question, how does this choice impact progress towards my short-term and my long-term goals? So how does it, if I do have short-term goals and I'm tying money up in real estate, that money is tied up for quite a long period of time. It's not liquid anymore. Would that cause any trouble, right? That's one thing I would ask. And then long-term goals, maybe one of my long-term goals is to retire and have other sources of income. Maybe real estate could work that way, right? So that's the kind of thing you would want to look at. And the second question, do I know what it costs? So not just the price, the total lifetime cost of ownership. And here's another part where real estate is something you really want to think about, right? It's not just the price tag on the house. It's not just the monthly mortgage payment. You've got insurance, you've got taxes, and you've got maintenance, which is somewhat unpredictable. I have heard rules of thumb of, expect 3 to 4% of the value of the home in maintenance costs every year. And that doesn't mean you'll have it every year, but an average over time. So all of a sudden you might need a new roof or new windows. We had to do new pointing on the house. Who wants to do that? But it wasn't cheap, right? So you got to work those things into the plan. And then if you're using debt to purchase something, if you're borrowing money, whether on a mortgage or some other way that you're borrowing, right, using a credit card for a purchase, that affects the price too, because you're paying interest to borrow that money. So you want to really look at that. Number 3, what am I hoping this will do for me? And this is an important question to ask ourselves, right? Whether it's the new boots or the real estate investment or, right, a mutual fund. What am I hoping this will do for me? And am I being realistic about that assumption? And that might take some research, or it might just take some kind of introspection. There's a professor of behavioral finance that I really like, Mayer Statman. I think he's at UC Santa Clara. And he talks about how everything that we buy has 3 levels of value. Number 1 is the utilitarian level. So if I use a pair of shoes as an example, the shoes are protecting my feet from the stones on the ground. That's the utilitarian value of shoes. But then there's also an emotional value. So how do I feel when I wear these shoes, right? I used to, when I gave talks on a stage, wear my fancy red high heels. How do I feel when I wear those shoes, right? That's why I bought them, because they make me feel like a badass, I have to say. And then number 3, the expressive value, which is, what do I think these shoes say to you about me? And I think without the expressive value, there would be many fewer options in automobiles in the world, right? I think of like all those guys with their fancy sports cars. That's got to be at least some of it, the expressive value. But when you're thinking about what am I hoping this will do for me, some examination of those 3 levels of value can be helpful, just to kind of catch yourself. Like, I'm hoping this new skin cream will make me look like I'm 20. Ooh, is that really realistic? Maybe not. Then number 4, what are the trade-offs? There's always trade-offs. So if I'm going to invest in this real estate, how much money is that going to take? And what does that mean I can't do with that money, right? If I'm putting dollars one place, that means I can't put those dollars somewhere else. So what are the trade-offs? And it doesn't mean it's the wrong decision. You just want to be aware of them going in, right? The trade-off of investing in a stock versus the bank account is that you could open your statement one day and see the value has gone down. As long as you're aware of that and okay with it up front, that's all right. Excuse me. And then the fifth question, how's my willpower right now? And this really can make a big difference, right? Some of my biggest spending mistakes were happening when I wasn't feeling very much willpower, whether it was, after a long, hard day and the kids were nagging me about something, or I'll tell you, I bought a pair of earrings once for an embarrassingly high price because I walked into the store. It was kind of a ritzy store. And I got this idea in my head, like, ooh, I obviously don't belong in this store, but I'm going to prove I belong in the store by buying this ridiculously expensive pair of earrings. I still keep them as a reminder to myself, like that was dumb, right? That was totally driven by, I don't know what, feelings of inadequacy or something. So checking in with your willpower, like, are you feeling tired? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling pressured by a salesperson? That's always a sign that it might be good to take a step back. Okay, a couple more questions coming in. Let me take a look real quick. Oh gosh, I have no idea how long the real estate market will stay up. I don't pretend to have a crystal ball on any of these things. Okay. Okay, question from Facebook Live on paying off debt. So she and her husband are trying to pay down some debt, want to make sure they're continuing to contribute to their retirement plans, right? An IRA or a retirement plan at work. This is definitely a difficult one, right? Because as Tracy points out, you're paying interest to the companies that have issued that debt, right? Who have taken a loan from you, or who you have taken a loan from. The thing about interest on debt is that is a guaranteed negative return, right? And usually the interest on the debt it's a guaranteed number, and it's going to be way higher than you could make on your own savings. So it's easy for that debt to kind of spiral downwards, and all of a sudden you end up owing way more than you ever spent on the item that you bought that got you into the debt, right? Whether it's college education or a couch. So you got to keep an eye on that. Some people are pretty hardcore about saying, pay down your debt before you do any investment. I think, for one thing, if you have any type of employer contribution in your retirement plan at work, right? If they're going to match some of your money, you don't want to give that up. So sometimes it's a match up to 3%. So try really hard to make that 3% contribution so you're not giving up that free money from your employer. After that, I think you want to prioritize paying down that debt and maybe do a small amount to the retirement plan at work, right? Even, I don't know, $25 a pay, something small, but just so you're starting to get that benefit of compound interest. And then know that once your debt is gone, then I don't want to say the nice thing, but the thing about paying off debt is that payment you make every month, you're living without those dollars. You're not spending those dollars on your today needs. So once the debt's gone, hopefully you can continue living, as you are today without using those dollars for today. So then you can redirect them from the past, because when you're paying off debt, you're using today's income to pay for something you bought in the past. But when you're saving and investing, you're using today's income on something for the future. So once the debt's gone, you can redirect those dollars to your future stuff, right? So then hopefully you can try to catch up on the investing for the future and on the saving. And you do want to make sure you've got some cash in the bank so that if you do have an unexpected expense, you don't have to tap that credit card again, right? You can use yourself as a bank instead of paying interest to those big companies who have their names on the stadiums. All right, I don't want to run too long. You've all been so kind to hang out with me for a while. Oh, let me make sure my contact information is there. website is there. I do have a new podcast called takebackretirement.com aimed at women of a certain age. So I'd love if you gave a listen and let me know what you think. 401k. So Michael from Facebook asks about 401k plan, so a retirement plan from work. How much should be invested so that you can live on the interest and take no capital? That is an interesting conversation and one we could debate for a long time. But a lot of people feel like, okay, I need to have enough saved up so that I can just live on whatever the interest payments are and not touch the principal, right? Not touch the amount of dollars. And I would argue that that's not necessarily the right strategy for a lot of people. If there's someone to whom you need to leave that pot of money, that's one thing. But if this money's goal, I'm all about what's the job of this money, right? Before you make any decision, saving, investing, anything, what is this money's job? What is it supposed to do for you and your life and your future? And very often it's a combination, right? I need this money to pay my mortgage in the future till it's gone, and then pay my bills, and then if I have extra medical needs, right? So it could be a bunch of different things. I want to make sure I leave $50,000 to my son, whatever it might be. So that's step one before we come up with a specific investing strategy. But in general, unless you want to make sure you leave that principal to someone else, I don't see a problem with spending some of it during your lifetime. Now, how much? You can't spend a heck of a lot of it each year because people live a long time these days, right? Financial retirement income planning would be so much easier if we knew exactly how long we were going to live. No, I'm not sure. Other things would be easy, but doing the calculations on how much my clients could spend every year would be much simpler if I knew how many years the money had to last. We don't know. We have no idea. So there are strategies to put in place to kind of to mitigate that, but there's been research done, looking at a whole bunch of different historical periods, and there's a lot of debate in the financial community about this, but the original paper came up with a safe withdrawal rate, which was if you have a pot of money in your 401k, for example, and you get to retirement, how much could I withdraw of it per year and hopefully not run out of money over a 25, 30-year period? And the answer was, with a lot of caveats and a lot of, other things, 4%. Now, some people say, oh, it actually might be a little higher. Some people say it might be lower. And there's ways to, put other things in place. But the thing is, we don't know what our investment experience is going to be. Are we going to live through some really rough investment markets? Are we going to live through some great investment markets? Because we don't know that up front, we have to kind of err on the conservative side and take out a smaller amount so that our money will last. The most dangerous day of your investing life is the day you retire, or more specifically, the day you go from accumulating assets to decumulating. Isn't that a lovely made up word that my industry came up with? So from when you are earning money to when you start using your own savings to pay your bills. Because if in that very beginning of your time period when you're spending down your money, if then we have 2008 and the market plummets and you have a certain amount of money you need every year. So imagine it, right? Let's just imagine you owned one stock and it was worth $100 per share. And then the markets had a terrible time and your stock went down from $100 per share to $50 per share. But I need a certain amount of money to pay my bills every year. I have to sell more shares to get that dollar amount when it's worth $50 a share than I did when it was worth $100 a share. So if you have poor investment experience in the first couple years of your retirement, then it makes it really hard to come back because you've sold more shares of what you owned, right? So there are strategies to try to mitigate that. I do have a series of webinars on women in retirement. There's a link on my website, sofiafinancial.com, Sofia with an F. And I go into more about that. So it's a kind of a complex question, but yeah. All right. It is 4:44. Thank you, everyone. There's some specific questions on here on a good bank or a good credit card. I don't really have a good answer for that. There are some websites like Nerd Wallet, or Magnify Money, and they do rankings of credit cards and savings accounts and banks and that kind of stuff. So I would turn to those types of resources. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your attention.